The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never seen such panic before. Thousands of alien representatives from across the galaxy sat in stunned silence as a massive holographic display showed another red disappearing from the star map. The Alterian system was gone. 5 billion souls had lived there just this morning. Now there was nothing but empty space and the growing shadow of the Void Reapers. Council Speaker Vexed Eyes for arms shook as he gripped the podium. His blue skin had turned pale gray with fear. In all his 300 years of service, he had never witnessed anything like this. The Void Reapers were not just conquering worlds. They were eating them. Every planet, every space station, every living being was being absorbed into their massive black ships that grew larger with each victory. The emergency session had been called after the 17th civilization fell in just 2 months. The speed of the destruction was beyond anything the Council had prepared for. These were not ordinary invaders seeking territory or resources. The Void Reapers consumed everything in their path, leaving behind only empty space where entire star systems once thrived. Ambassador Krillax from the Feathered Republics stood up on his bird-like legs, his colorful plumage dulled by stress. His voice cracked as he spoke to the assembly. "We have tried everything." The Crystalline Consortium threw their most powerful energy shields against the Reapers. The machines cut through them like they were made of paper. The hive mind sent coordinated attacks, with billions of warriors moving as one. The Reapers adapted and destroyed them in hours. Murmurs of despair rippled through the chamber. Every species present had contributed their best weapons, their finest strategies, their most advanced technology. Nothing had worked. The Void Reapers seemed to have an answer for every tactic, a counter for every weapon. Their black ships moved through space like a plague, growing stronger with each world they devoured. The gas-dwelling Nephri had sent their largest bioships, living vessels the size of small moons. The Reapers had turned them into more raw material for their fleet. The telepathic Zarithi had tried to overwhelm the machines with psychic attacks. The Reapers had somehow learned to block their mental powers and then hunted down every Zarithi world in revenge. Ancient Archivist Mordun slowly made his way to the center of the chamber. His old tentacles moved carefully as he carried the oldest data cores from the Council archives. These records went back thousands of years, containing information about every known species in the galaxy. His ancient eyes had seen many crises, but never anything that threatened the very existence of all intelligent life. "I have searched the deepest records," Mordun announced, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Every known military force, every alliance, every weapon system, all had been tried and failed." He paused, his tentacles trembling as he accessed a file marked with warning symbols. "But there's one entry I found. A species discovered recently in Sector 7739. The chamber fell completely silent. Hope flickered in alien eyes across the vast hall. However, Mordun continued, the survey team classified their homeworld as a Class 12 death world. Such planets are considered uninhabitable. The radiation levels alone would kill most of us in minutes. The atmospheric toxins, the violent weather, the dangerous predators. Our scientists believe that nothing intelligent could possibly evolve in such conditions. Class 12 death worlds were legendary in Council records. These were planets so hostile that even the hardiest species avoided them completely. Worlds where the very air was poison, where the ground shook constantly with earthquakes, where massive storms raged for centuries. The idea that any thinking beings could survive there, let alone build a civilization, seemed impossible. Ambassador Krillax spread his wings in a gesture of desperate hope. What if our scientists were wrong? What if something did evolve there? If they survived on such a world, perhaps they could fight what we cannot. The debate that followed was fierce. Many council members argued that sending a distress beacon to an unknown species was too dangerous. What if these Deathworlders were even worse than the Void Reapers? What if they were just as violent and destructive? The risk seemed enormous. But as another star system blinked out of existence on the display, the choice became clear. The galaxy was dying. In a few more months, there would be nothing left but the Void Reapers and empty space. Any chance, no matter how small, was worth taking. Speaker Vextai looked around the chamber at the frightened faces of 1,000 species. Each one represented millions or billions of lives hanging in the balance. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on him like a physical force. With a heavy heart, he made a decision that would change everything. "Send the beacon to Sector 7739, he ordered. "If these Deathworlders exist, if they can help us, perhaps our desperation will make them our allies. If they cannot help, then we face extinction either way." The beacon launched into hyperspace, carrying a simple message of desperate plea toward a small yellow star where an unknown species waited. None of the council members knew what they had just awakened. The council's warning systems went crazy the moment the human ships appeared. Alarms blared across every station as sensors detected radiation levels that should have cooked anything alive inside those vessels. The alien technicians stared at their readings in disbelief. These ships were running so hot that their metal hulls glowed faintly in the darkness of space. Admiral James Patterson's flagship looked like it had been through hell and back. Deep gouges scarred its armor, where space debris had torn through at impossible speeds. Burn marks covered sections where meteor impacts had nearly breached the hull. Any civilized species would have scrapped such a damaged vessel, but these humans had flown it across half the galaxy without hesitation. When the airlock opened, the council members got their first look at the beings they had summoned. Admiral Patterson stepped into the chamber, and immediately every alien present felt a chill run through their bodies. His face was a map of old battles, with scars crossing his forehead and jaw. His eyes held a hardness that spoke of decisions no peaceful being should ever have to make. Behind him walked Colonel Rebecca Hayes, her uniform crisp despite the long journey. Her movements were controlled and precise, like a predator constantly ready to strike. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had survived fights that would have destroyed lesser beings. The way she scanned the room told everyone present that she was evaluating threats and escape routes even during a diplomatic meeting. The aliens had expected the careful, formal protocols they use when meeting new species. Instead, these humans walked into the chamber like they owned it. They showed no fear of the hundreds of strange alien forms surrounding them. They displayed no awe at the technological wonders of the council chambers. They simply looked around with a calm assessment of experienced warriors sizing up a battlefield. When Admiral Patterson began to speak, his words sent shockwaves through the assembly. He talked about Earth's third global war of the century like he was discussing the weather. The aliens could barely comprehend what he was saying. Global wars were rare events that happened perhaps once in a civilization's entire history. These humans have fought 3 in just 100 years. "We got your message while we were dealing with a nuclear exchange in the Pacific Theater," Patterson continued casually. "Had to postpone our response until we contained the radiation and rebuilt the orbital defense grid. Again." The council members looked at each other in growing horror. These beings spoke of nuclear warfare and radiation like minor inconveniences. They rebuilt the defenses as a routine matter, suggesting they faced such destruction regularly. Captain David Stone moved to the center of the chamber, activating a holographic display that made several aliens faint outright. The images showed Earth cities in various states of destruction and rebuilding. Massive towers rose from radioactive craters, while battles raged in the streets below. Humans worked to repair critical infrastructure, even as explosions lit up the sky around them. "This is New York after the resource wars ended last year," Stone explained, pointing to a city that looked like it had been through an apocalypse. "We lost about 40% of the population, but we rebuilt the important parts in 6 months. That's pretty standard recovery time for us." The aliens watching the footage couldn't believe what they were seeing. Entire sections of the city were nothing but rubble. Yet humans continued to live and work there. Children played in parks built on top of old battlefields. Families had picnics while construction crews cleared away the remains of destroyed buildings. One particularly disturbing image showed humans celebrating some kind of festival in the ruins of what had once been a major population center. They were laughing, dancing, and sharing food while sitting on the twisted metal remains of their former civilization. To the council members, it looked like madness. To the humans, it was apparently just another day. "You see," Colonel Hayes added, "we've been fighting extinction-level events since we climbed down from the trees. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcano eruptions, plague outbreaks that killed half our population. Every time, we adapted and came back stronger. She brought up another display, showing Earth's natural disasters. Hurricanes that could level cities, earthquakes that split continents, volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun for years. The humans had not just survived these events, but had learned to predict and prepare for them. Your Void Reapers are certainly impressive, Admiral Patterson admitted, reviewing the tactical data about humanity's new enemies. Their technology is advanced, their coordination is perfect, and their strategy is flawless. But they have one weakness they don't even know about. The Council leaned forward, desperate for any hope. They fight like machines because they are machines. Patterson smiled grimly. They expect logical responses to logical tactics. They've never faced an enemy that thrives on chaos, that gets stronger when things go wrong, that considers impossible odds to be just another interesting challenge. The alien representatives began to understand with growing terror that they hadn't called for help from fellow victims of a harsh universe. They had contacted the apex predators of that harsh universe, being so dangerous that their own planet had spent millions of years trying to kill them, and had only made them stronger. The Council's war room had become a place of quiet terror as the human military officers spread out across the chamber like they owned it. Major Emily Carter sat at the main tactical console, casually eating what looked like a brown brick wrapped in silver foil. The alien scientists had already identified the substance as containing enough preservatives and chemicals to kill most known species within minutes. Carter noticed the stares and held up her protein bar with a shrug. Standard field rations. We've been eating stuff like this since we started exploring space. Probably not much different from the emergency food we ate during the Antarctic Wars. She took another bite while pulling up the Void Reaper combat footage, completely unaware that she was consuming what the aliens considered a deadly toxin. The watching council members exchanged nervous glances. These humans treated poison as a light snack. What kind of world had created beings so adapted to hostile conditions that they could eat toxic waste without even thinking about it? Carter began reviewing the Reaper attack patterns with the detached professionalism of someone who had studied warfare her entire life. She pointed to formations on the tactical display, highlighting how the enemy machines moved with perfect coordination. Look at this pattern here. Every single attack follows the same sequence. Target the command ship first, then work outward in expanding circles. Very logical, very efficient. She switched to another battle recording, this one showing the destruction of the Zarithi fleet. Same thing here. They identify the most important vessel and eliminate it immediately. The rest of the fleet falls apart without central coordination. Carter paused her analysis to finish her protein bar, crumpling the wrapper and tossing it aside. Problem is, they assume every enemy thinks like them. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Brooks moved to stand beside the display, his weathered hands pointing to specific tactical formations. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too many battles and lost too many friends. These Reapers fight like they went to the same military academy. Everything by the book, everything following proper procedure. He activated a new display, showing grainy footage from Earth's conflicts. The images were disturbing to the alien observers. Human soldiers fighting in conditions that should have been impossible. Cities burning while people continued to work and live in the ruins. Military units operating effectively even after their command structures had been completely destroyed. We learned a long time ago that plans don't survive contact with the enemy, Brooks continued. On Earth, we train our people to keep fighting when everything goes wrong. When the generals are dead, when the radios don't work, when you're down to your last ammunition and surrounded by enemies, that's not the end of the fight for us. That's when things get interesting. The alien military advisors watching the footage looked physically sick. They saw human soldiers continuing missions after being cut off from all support for weeks. They watched civilians repair critical infrastructure while battles rage around them. Most disturbing of all, they saw humans actually performing better under these impossible conditions, as if chaos and desperation somehow made them more effective. Sergeant Anna Foster stepped forward, carrying what looked like a simple toolbox. The aliens assumed she was bringing maintenance equipment for the human technology. Instead, she opened it to reveal a collection of everyday items that she began assembling with practiced ease. "Your species have been asking us about our weapons technology," Foster said while connecting pieces together. "You want to know about our plasma cannons and fusion bombs. But that's not really how humans fight." She held up a completed device that looked like it had been built from spare parts and scrap metal. The alien engineers recognized some of the components: a standard gravity manipulator, some common power cells, basic materials that could be found on any space station. But Foster had combined them in a way that made their sensors go crazy with danger warnings. "We learned early that the best weapons are the ones your enemy doesn't see coming," she explained, demonstrating how the improvised device could punch through armor plating that was supposed to be indestructible. When you spent millions of years fighting everything from saber-toothed cats to nuclear winter, you get good at making weapons out of whatever's lying around. She pulled out more everyday items from her toolbox: a coffee cup, some wire, a broken communicator, and a small power source. Within minutes, she had created another device that could disable electronic systems from a distance. The watching aliens realized that humans could turn literally anything into a weapon. Captain David Stone activated another display showing more Earth combat footage. This time, it was even more disturbing. Humans fighting in overwhelming numbers against superior enemies, and somehow winning through sheer stubborn refusal to give up. "The thing about Void Reapers is they fight smart," Stone explained. "They calculate odds, they assess threats, they make logical decisions about when to advance and when to retreat. Very sensible approach to warfare." He paused the footage on an image of human soldiers charging directly into enemy fire. "But we gave up being sensible about 50,000 years ago." The display showed battles where humans were outnumbered 100 to 1 and kept fighting anyway. Scenarios where any logical species would have surrendered immediately, but humans just adapted their tactics and pressed forward. The footage revealed something that chilled the alien observers to their cores. These humans didn't just survive on their death world. They had learned to love the challenge of impossible odds. They treated overwhelming enemy numbers not as a reason to retreat, but as an opportunity for a more interesting fight. The Council was beginning to understand that they hadn't called for help from fellow victims of a cruel universe. They had contacted the universe's most successful predators, being so dangerous that their own planet had spent millions of years trying to kill them, and had only succeeded in making them deadlier. The first human attack began in a way that made every alien observer think they were watching a mass suicide. Captain Thomas Mitchell's destroyer Defiant broke formation and accelerated directly toward the largest Void Reaper ship in the enemy fleet. The massive dreadnought was 3 times the size of any human vessel and bristled with weapons that could vaporize entire squadrons. Panic erupted across the Council's command center. Ambassador Krillax screamed into his communicator, desperately trying to warn the humans about what they were doing. "Pull back. That's a suicide run. Your ship will be destroyed." But Mitchell's voice came back calm and steady, like he was discussing plans for dinner. "Ramming speed was good enough for our ancestors when they fought sea battles back home. Worked pretty well against the orbital platforms during the Martian Rebellion, too. Figure it'll work just fine here." The alien observers watched in horror as the human ship continued its impossible charge. Reaper weapons blazed against the Defiant's hull, melting armor and causing explosions across its surface. Any sensible crew would have turned away or ejected in escape pods. Instead, the humans somehow made their damaged ship go even faster. The Council members could only stare as Mitchell's destroyer slammed into the Reaper dreadnought at a significant fraction of light speed. The explosion lit up space for thousands of kilometers. Both ships simply ceased to exist, turned into expanding clouds of superheated gas and twisted metal. The shockwave damaged several other Reaper vessels and sent debris flying in all directions. What terrified the aliens most was that this wasn't an accident or a desperate last resort. The humans had planned this. They had deliberately sacrificed their most powerful warship and its entire crew just to take out one enemy vessel. The tactical computers across the Reaper fleet suddenly started showing error messages. They had no programming to understand why any species would willingly destroy valuable resources for such minimal tactical gain. While the aliens were still processing the shock, Commander Lisa Parker's assault transports were already moving toward the next target. Her boarding parties prepared for combat in ways that defied every law of physics and common sense. They put on primitive-looking armor that somehow kept them alive in the vacuum of space, and armed themselves with weapons that looked like they belonged in a museum. The Reaper ships had no defenses against boarding actions because no civilized species attempted them. Space combat was supposed to happen at long range with energy weapons and guided missiles. The idea of actually climbing inside an enemy vessel to fight hand-to-hand was considered primitive and suicidal by every known military doctrine. Parker's teams cut through the Reaper hull using tools that were barely more advanced than blowtorches. Once inside, they fought their way through corridors filled with deadly machines using weapons that would have been familiar to Earth soldiers from centuries past. Axes, hammers, explosive charges, and firearms that fired simple metal projectiles instead of sophisticated energy beams. The Void Reapers tried to adapt their programming to counter these tactics, but how do you fight an enemy that doesn't follow any logical rules? Their combat algorithms assumed that any boarding party would retreat when facing superior numbers. Instead, the humans charged forward, using the narrow corridors to limit the Reapers' numerical advantage. When their advanced weapons malfunctioned in the hostile environment inside the Reaper ships, the humans simply switched to more primitive tools. Knives, crowbars, even their bare hands became weapons against machines that had no programming to deal with such crude attacks. The Reapers had spent eons perfecting defenses against energy weapons and guided missiles. Nobody had thought to program them for combat against beings who would beat them to death with wrenches. The most disturbing moment came when Sergeant Kevin Walsh's squad found themselves trapped in a Reaper reactor chamber, surrounded by enemies and slowly running out of oxygen. Instead of surrendering or calling for evacuation, they started singing old military songs while they fought. Their voices echoed through the ship's corridors as they systematically dismantled Reaper combat units with tools they had improvised from reactor components. The alien observers listening to the combat recordings couldn't understand what they were hearing. These humans were facing certain death in the vacuum of space, fighting enemies that outnumbered them 50-1, and they were singing about it. Some of the songs were centuries old, passed down through generations of human warriors who had faced similar impossible odds. Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Turner coordinated the assault from her command ship, watching as her people achieved victories that should have been mathematically impossible. Her tactical approach ignored every principle of efficient resource management that the Reapers were programmed to expect. Where the machines calculated optimal force deployment and minimal acceptable losses, Turner sent her people into battles they might not survive simply because those battles needed fighting. When the Reapers tried to target her command structure, they discovered that every human soldier was trained to take command if their officers fell. Destroying the leadership only made the humans more unpredictable, not less effective. The Void Reapers' perfect efficiency began falling apart as their logical programming tried to process enemies who operated outside all known parameters. These humans fought like they enjoyed it, adapted like chaos was their natural element, and kept coming even when mathematics said they should be dead. The machines had conquered 17 civilizations by being superior in every measurable way. But they had never faced an enemy that didn't care about being superior, that turned disadvantages into advantages, and that considered impossible odds to be an invitation rather than a warning. The final battle against the Void Reapers ended not with massive fleet engagement or some advanced superweapon, but with one human doing what humans do best when everything goes wrong. Chief Petty Officer Robert Hayes found himself alone inside the last Reaper mothership, his suit leaking air and his weapon systems completely dead. The massive vessel was trying to escape into dark space, carrying with it the collected knowledge and technology of 17 destroyed civilizations. If it got away, the Reapers could rebuild their entire fleet within a few years. Hayes looked at the ship's reactor core, then at the mining charges he carried for demolition work, and made a decision that would have seemed insane to any logical being. His life support had maybe 10 minutes left. The reactor core was heavily shielded and would require precise placement of explosives to breach. Any reasonable person would call for backup or try to find another way. Hayes just started humming an old song his grandfather had taught him and got to work. The alien technicians monitoring the battle watched in stunned silence as Hayes methodically attached explosive charges to critical systems while his oxygen levels dropped toward zero. He worked with the calm efficiency of someone who had done similar jobs 1,000 times before, even though this was clearly a one-way mission. When his oxygen finally ran out, Hayes activated his radio one last time. His voice was steady and matter-of-fact, like he was calling home after a normal day at work. "Control, this is Hayes. Package is ready for delivery. Tell my kids their dad took out the big one, and tell them I'm proud of them." The explosion that followed could be seen from 3 star systems away. The Reaper mothership, the last remnant of the machine intelligence that had terrorized the galaxy, simply ceased to exist. With it died the collective knowledge of how to build more Void Reapers. The threat that had seemed unstoppable was ended by one human with some mining explosives and an absolute refusal to give up. 3 weeks later, General Margaret Thompson stood before the reformed Galactic Council in the same chamber where Admiral Patterson had first addressed them. The mood was completely different now. Where before there had been panic and desperation, now there was relief mixed with a new kind of nervousness. The galaxy was safe, but the aliens were beginning to understand what they had unleashed. The formal ceremony was everything the Council could make it. Representatives from every surviving species offered their gratitude with speeches that lasted for hours. They presented Thompson with medals, titles, and honors that had never been given to any non-Council species. The humans had saved them all, and the aliens wanted to show appropriate appreciation. But even as they celebrated, reports were coming in from the Galactic Rim. Human exploration ships were already pushing into regions that had been considered too dangerous to explore. They were investigating anomalies that other species had marked as hazardous and avoided for centuries. Several human science vessels had requested permission to study active black holes and neutron stars up close. Council Speaker Vextai presented the formal offer that the entire Council had debated for days. Humanity has earned the right to full membership in our governing body. We offer you seats on every major committee, voting rights in all decisions, and shared access to our most advanced technologies. Thompson listened politely, but her response was not what the Council expected. She smiled the same way Hayes had smiled before he went on his final mission. "We really appreciate the offer, and it's quite an honor. But honestly, governing isn't something we're particularly good at. Too much sitting in meetings, not enough getting things done." She gestured toward the tactical displays that still showed the aftermath of the recent battles. "We prefer a simpler arrangement. When something threatens the peace and safety of the galaxy, you contact us. We'll deal with it. In return, we keep salvage rights from whatever we fight, and we get first choice on any new frontiers that need exploring." The Council members looked at each other nervously. They were beginning to realize that humans viewed the recent war not as a terrible crisis, but as an interesting challenge that they had enjoyed solving. The idea of giving these Deathworlders unlimited access to unexplored space was terrifying, but they also knew they had no choice. The formal agreement was signed within hours. The aliens had learned a fundamental truth about the universe. There were 2 types of intelligent species: those that had evolved on peaceful garden worlds where conflict was rare and disturbing, and those that crawled up from death worlds where warfare was just another fact of life. As the human fleet prepared to depart for the Galactic Rim, their crews were already making plans for their next adventure. They spoke excitedly about exploring uncharted regions, investigating dangerous phenomena, and finding new challenges to overcome. The aliens watched them go with a mixture of gratitude and relief. Council Speaker Vextai updated the official records with shaking hands. Earth's classification was permanently changed from Class 12 Deathworld to Do Not Disturb, Deathworlders at Work. A new note was added to all star charts. Warning: this system contains beings who consider extinction-level events to be recreational activities. Approach with extreme caution. The galaxy was safe, but everyone understood that safety had come at the price of awakening something that might be more dangerous than what they had originally faced. The only difference was that this new threat was pointed outward, toward the unknown regions beyond civilized space, where humanity would continue doing what it did best, turning impossible challenges into routine victories.